Hey Links team, this is Mrs. Erickson, and I am going to kind of flip the classroom here and give you these notes on photosynthesis and cellular respiration so that we can start a lab in class. So get out the handout that I gave you in class. It's titled Photosynthesis/Respiration Notes. And then you just follow along and take the notes as I go through this slideshow. So here we go. The first question that you'll fill in on your note page is, what is photosynthesis? And what I'd like you to write down is it's converting the sun's energy to make glucose, which of course we've talked about is the same as sugar, is the same as carbohydrates, starch, and so forth. Glucose, or sugar, can come in many forms in a plant. You can get this glucose from eating the leaves, like lettuce. You can get it from eating the roots, like carrots. And you can get it from eating fruits, like zucchini or apples or things like that. Next on your note sheet is number 2. We need to get familiar with the symbols of water and carbon dioxide because you're going to be using a formula. So get to know that carbon dioxide is always kind of shorthand CO2, which means 1 carbon and 2 oxygen. And that's how you write carbon dioxide. And of course, I think everybody's familiar with water. You'll see that written as H2O. Number 3, what do plants need to begin photosynthesis? And oftentimes this will be referred to as the reactants. What does the plant need to start the reaction of photosynthesis? And it's 3 things. Plants have to have carbon dioxide, they have to have water, and they have to have sunlight. And the sunlight has to be shining where there's chloroplasts, which most of the time is on their leaves. Sometimes it can be stems, but most of the time leaves. Number 4, how does a plant get carbon dioxide? So we're going to do a lab on this to show you how plants get carbon dioxide inside of them. It enters through the leaves through something called stomata or stomates. And so you can see the picture here. The opening is the stomate. The opening is. And on the sides here, these things here, they happen to be colored green, are called the guard cells. And the guard cells are kind of the gatekeepers of the opening, the stomate, deciding if it should be open to let things in and out or if it should be closed. And we'll talk more about that when we do the lab. But I do need you to be familiar with the word stomata or stomate. That's how carbon dioxide gets into the plant. Number 5, this process of carbon dioxide getting into the plant is called transpiration. Transpiration happens because of the stomates in the leaves. And what this does is when the sun shines on the leaves, it starts to pull the water up through the plant. And that's how water can move against gravity in a plant, is because of these stomates and transpiration. So the sun shines on the leaf, it pulls the water up through the plant and out the stomates in the form of water vapor. And I will prove this to you in class. I'll put a baggie over some leaves and you will actually see water condensation starting to form on the baggie because of the water being pulled up through the plant. And that's transpiration. Number 6, how does water get from the roots to the leaves? Well, we know that roots take up water. Now you know that it goes against gravity by transpiration. But, how does it get from the roots to the very top of a 50-foot tree? Well, plants have something called xylem. And you can see here, xylem is just kind of little tubes running throughout a plant. So this is a piece of celery that's been cut in half. And you can see we've colored the xylem red, or the water, red. So when the water went up the celery, it turned the xylem tissue red. And that's how water moves up a plant. It has to start in the roots, and then the xylem carries it throughout the entire plant. And then, of course, how does it go against gravity? These little guys here, these openings called stomates, when the sun shines on them, they open up and they pull the water up through the xylem and out the plant. So sunlight. Well, why is sunlight so important in photosynthesis? You probably know that it reacts with chloroplasts. We've looked at chloroplasts under the microscope. You've identified them in drawings. You've talked about how chloroplasts now create glucose and work with the mitochondria. But what does sunlight have to do with all of this? Chloroplasts are filled with something called chlorophyll. That's what makes them green. And chlorophyll has it does something to the molecules. So in number 8, that's what we're going to talk about here, is what does sunlight do when it reacts with these chloroplasts filled with chlorophyll? It splits the water molecule. So here's a water molecule. Remember, water is 2 hydrogens and an oxygen. And carbon dioxide is also an ingredient, so it splits the water molecule. It uses carbon dioxide. And when you have those 2 ingredients and then you add sunlight to it in the chloroplasts, what the chlorophyll does is it splits apart the water molecule and it rearranges things into something that looks like this. So what this is 6 carbon dioxide molecules and 6 water molecules put into the chlorophyll reacting with sunlight, pulled apart, the water is, and rearranged into this, which is called glucose. And then there's some extras. If you have 6 water and 6 carbon dioxide molecules and you count everything in here, what you will see is there's 2 extra oxygen molecules left over. That's considered a byproduct because the plant doesn't need oxygen for very many things like animals do. So, what is the chemical formula for glucose? Once you pull that water molecule apart and you add it to carbon dioxide, you get something called glucose. 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. And if you count, you'll see that that's what you have here. This is a glucose molecule, much bigger than, let's say, a water molecule, which is 2 hydrogens and an oxygen. So you put all this together into an equation because it's kind of shorthand and it's easy to look at and to see what's going on. So on the left side of the arrow, this side, that's called the reactants, what the plant needs. It needs carbon dioxide, it needs water, and it needs sunlight to split that water apart inside the chloroplasts. And with the use of sunlight, creates glucose. So on the right side of the arrow are the products. Glucose is a product of photosynthesis, and then some extra oxygens, which is also a product, but the plant doesn't use much of it, so it just lets it go as a byproduct or a waste. And of course, we benefit from that. This is a great picture showing what the equation does. You need sunlight, left side of the equation, carbon dioxide, left side, water, left side. The roots take up the water. The sun shining on the chloroplast pulls that carbon dioxide molecule apart. And then over here, the product, you get more leaves, or you get fruit, or you get nice thick roots that are full of glucose. And that's all glucose. And then in the process, you have extra oxygen that the plant gives off. So that's a great drawing to show how photosynthesis works. Byproduct of photosynthesis is considered oxygen because the plant doesn't use hardly any of it. So it's released into the environment. And of course, we need that. So we get to breathe it in. Any animal, that means insects, fish, reptiles, any animal is going to benefit from the byproduct of photosynthesis. Who uses the sugar created by plants? Don't think it's just animals, because all living things have to have it. So the plants, they're the ones that produce glucose, but often they produce more food than they need. So then they store it in stems, like a stem that you would eat is celery. They store it in roots, would be like carrots. They store it in seeds like almonds, or fruit, like I said, zucchini or apples or oranges or what, tomatoes, for animals to eat. So here are some examples of storage in the roots, storage in the stems, some fruits, some nuts. So the plant oftentimes produces more, and then that gives animals the ability to eat it. How do plants and animals get the energy from the food? You guys know this, the mitochondria. The mitochondria takes the glucose that we just ate and other molecules from the food in the presence of oxygen release energy called ATP. So the mitochondria needs glucose and oxygen in order to make ATP. Mitochondria making energy from food has a scientific name that you guys are going to learn about. It's called cellular respiration. Don't get it mixed up with respiration in breathing. That's different. Cellular respiration has to do with making energy in the mitochondria. So there's a shorthand for cellular respiration, in other words, an equation. And if you look at this closely, you might notice something. So on the left side for cellular respiration, in other words, the reactants, the mitochondria needs glucose and it needs oxygen. And then in the mitochondria, it produces carbon dioxide, water, and there we have it, energy. So we have some byproducts here along with the energy. So let's talk a little bit about that. Where does cellular respiration take place in our cells? I hope everybody knows this now. It is the mitochondria. Why do living things need energy? Why is this mitochondria so important? We need it for all of the characteristics of life. To grow, to reproduce. We need it for energy. We need it for, we need water. We are made of cells. We need it to reproduce. We need it to exchange gases, and we need it to give off waste. We need energy for all those things. So, looking at the two equations that you just learned, this is cellular respiration, this is photosynthesis. Do you see something? Look at the products and the reactants. What you should see is what photosynthesis needs, cellular respiration gives off. And what photosynthesis creates, the product, cellular respiration needs, the reactant. So as you can see, in life, plants and animals are very dependent on each other. We need plants to take carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight to create food and our oxygen supply. But that glucose and oxygen, when eaten by animals, gives off carbon dioxide, and we give off water also that can be used in photosynthesis. And of course, ATP is used by both plants and animals to do all of this. So what I'd like you to do is flip your paper over and in your own way, draw the process of photosynthesis using a plant, sun, water, fruit of some kind, carbon dioxide, and oxygen. Now, if you're perplexed on how to do this, there was a really good drawing in this slideshow itself that you could use as a way to kind of help you out. And I'd like you then to bring that to class. And bring questions to class if you have any questions. Thanks.